What's up YouTube? This is the CEO Gamer. So Nioh has produced the DLC Dragon of the North, and with it came a lot of changes. In this video, I want to focus primarily on the Guardian Spirits. So now that you can get a primary and a secondary, it really allows you to kind of combine things and stack things together and augment your weaknesses with the Guardian Spirits that you weren't able to do before. And so in this video, I'm going to cover my top 5 Guardian Spirits. Now keep in mind, this is not in terms of order. I don't think one is necessarily superior to the other. They have their strengths and they have their weaknesses. Their benefits that can be very useful to some and not to others. But after testing a lot of these and going through a lot of these on different enemies and just seeing how they performed as a whole, these are my top 5 recommendations. So number 1 I'm going to come in is the Suzaku here. This one here offers a series of benefits besides the spirit protection and all it does. This one's very interesting. So this is kind of like a trump card. So if you have enough Amrita to activate your living weapon, but then you run out of health, it will automatically activate your living weapon. So it's kind of like a trump card that if you are about to die or run out of health, this will activate, and it allows you to kind of have another life, very much like the quick change scroll does. And because of that, also you get it's a great Amrita building weapon, or a great Amrita Guardian Spirit here. So Amrita earned using the living weapon is 30% when you max it all out, which is quite impressive. If you have a fire-based weapon, this will also stack the damage on it. And it also increases your charges your Amrita engage when your health gets below, I think it's below 25%. So this is very, very powerful to kind of almost create an infinite living weapon type situation, you know, with the building of the Amrita gauge and also the Amrita you get from it. If you need to build or earn a lot of Amrita, using this as a living weapon is fantastic. If you have a fire-based weapon, this is also fantastic for it as well. The recovery is an A+, which is fantastic. Might isn't huge, 1560, and the usable time is solid at 16.3. But overall, I find this to be a very, very good Guardian Spirit. And when you do activate it, it does a pretty darn good job of hitting multiple enemies across a wide space. So if you have 2 or 3 enemies that are kind of surrounding you a little bit, because of the swirling pattern of the Guardian Spirit, this one I find to be incredibly effective as a Guardian Spirit. The next one I'd recommend is Atlas Bear. So this is a lightning based one. A couple of interesting things about it. So it'll increase your damage inversely to proportional how low your ki is. So if you are fighting somebody or an enemy that is constantly pressuring you, where your ki is never really that high or never really fully charges, then this will start to increase your damage in relationship to your ki. So the lower your ki gets, the more your damage increases. And this is pretty darn powerful and very useful. You get a life recovery by grapple. So if you have the axe and you can grapple them, or if you have the Kusarigama and you can perform a grapple attack, you can get 200 health, which is usually about, it's not quite 10% of most players, you know, 125, 150 plus usually have 2,000-3,000 health. So it's anywhere between 10 and say 7 or 8%, which, you know, you do this over time and it can add up a lot. Versus lightning, that gives you a nice buff. Close combat damage, it adds a 12% buff to that. And so this is fantastic, especially if you're, say, a lightning axe user, or you're using any particular weapon that you're going to be constantly in close range. This is a great buff for that. Also, this I found to be highly effective when using it. So when you start to run out of ki, it will shorten the recovery time immensely on how fast you can kind of regain the ki and start moving again. And you've had those experiences where you were out of ki and you just weren't able to do anything. You were dead, you know, just dead in the water there. This thing almost cuts it in half, and it's much faster. Like, you run out of ki, but you bounce out of it pretty quick. So it gives you a chance to avoid taking those critical hits. I found it to be just an immense benefit in your normal combat. Recovery is a little slow on this one here. Might is good. Usable time is excellent. One thing I do like about the Atlas Bear, if you've used it before as a Guardian Spirit, is that when you use a moment talisman or you actually land an Atlas Bear critical attack, the bear's paws slam and pancake the person down to the ground, and they're temporarily immobilized. So it allows you to get a critical hit on that particular being. And that's unless they can just poise completely through it. So, and of course, lightning damage slows down their movement as well. So, just a fantastic guardian spirit that I really, really like, and have found as a tremendous benefit. Another one on the list is the Tengen Kujaku. This one is interesting because of one particular benefit that it has here. So, the Amrita absorption, which is a stance space. So you get a temporary special effect depending upon the stance you're in when you absorb Amrita. So if you're absorbing Amrita and you are in a high stance, this will increase your attack. If you're in a mid stance, it'll increase your defense, and if you're in a low stance, it'll increase your ki. Why is this beneficial? Because they actually can stack upon each other. So let's say you have 3 enemies that you are looking at from a distance and you want to shoot them with a rifle or a cannon. You shoot them in a high stance with your particular gun or matchlock, whatever, and you'll get the attack buff. You switch to a medium stance and do it, you'll get the defense buff, and you switch to a low stance and you get the ki buff, and they will all stack on top of each other. So in some of my testing, I've noticed that you can increase your attack 40, 50, 60%. It's just an incredible buff. When you stack everything together, it really gives you a massive attack bonus. So this is fantastic. It gives you a nice yokai damage reduction. The other thing that I really like about the Tengen Kujaku is the elemental effect. So it does 2 things with the elements. One, it will extend the time or the effect that you buff with wind, water, fire, lightning, your particular weapon and the element. And that it can have a massive advantage for that to be able to hold twice as long. On top of it, it's got a stacking effect that it increases your elemental attack damage. So not only are you basically doubling the time, but then you're increasing it by another 10 or 11% roughly. And that's a really, really, really useful buff, especially if you're constantly using wind, water, fire, or lightning talismans. It's just fantastic. In terms of recovery, it's an A+, which is fantastic. The might 1550 is solid, and usable time is 21.2. In terms of actually using it in practical gameplay, like as a moment talisman or in the actual critical hit in your attack, the way the peacock attacks, it's kind of like right in front of you in a circular area as you're seeing on the screen, and that's useful, but I found others to be better. So really, I find that most of the benefits you're getting from this are the passive benefits you're getting, not necessarily the living weapon itself. Okay, the next one on the list is Bisha's Centipede. So this is from the DLC. The coolest thing about Bisha's Centipede that I find very, very useful is the piercing guard. So if you're in a close combat situation and you're going to attack somebody, especially if you have an elemental buff, then this will get through their guard. So while they're trying to guard, 25% of it is going to get through there. And so you're going to still do a lot of damage on them. And so if somebody wants to guard you, that's fine. They think they're going to be, taking no damage. Not going to happen. They're going to take a lot of damage. And especially if you have, fast-moving weapons like dual swords, or you have the Kusarigama, which has a lot of consecutive attacks. These things are going to get through, and you're just going to start wrecking people with this. And so, not just in PvP, but also some of the enemies that you're fighting against. So, fantastic. If you have a poison buff, even more gives you that. The money in for enemies increases by 50%, and of course, you get the strong attack ki reduction. Also, the last thing is it reduces the damage bonus you get from you attack from somebody from behind. But in return, it increases your close combat damage. And considering that you're going to have more close combat situations than you are going to attacks from behind, I find that to be a good benefit. The recovery time on this one is incredibly slow. And so that is kind of a bummer. That's why I prefer Bisha's as kind of a secondary Guardian Spirit, not a primary. The damage is great and the usable time's good, but if you've ever used the Bisha Centipede, you know, it kind of comes out of the ground, goes out, does some earth damage, and then it kind of circles around them, and it's not really that accurate for predicting hits against enemies. Atlas Bear is much more straightforward, same as Izuna. You know, Suzaku, all these others are a little bit more predictable, whereas this one's a little bit harder. So that's, as a living weapon, I don't find it as useful, but the benefits, particularly the piercing guard, I find is fantastic. And then my other, you know, top 5 favorite is Izuna, and so this one kind of has a host of benefits here. So first of all, any strong attack that you do is going to earn you Amrita, so you can build up your Amrita gauge super fast with this one here. That is really nice. Amrita earned, it's also, again, a great Amrita builder, so you're kind of stacking things as a whole. The close combat key reduction is very useful if you're going to be constantly in close combat situations. To have that reduction in the key by 15% at a fully maxed out Izuna is very useful. Wind damage, if you're someone who uses wind-based weapons or use wind talismans to buff your things, then I would highly recommend this because the extra wind damage is quite hefty. And also, this one is really a nice kind of benefit. So after you use your living weapon, you restore your health over a short period of time. So kind of like the rejuvenation talisman, it does this, except it does it at about twice the health and speed. So it's much faster and it's much more health. And so my recommendation, and I found this in using it myself, is that as soon as I'm done with the living weapon, is that I kind of go into, you know, crazy attack mode, because any damage I'm taking is going to be recovering very fast. So right after a living weapon, it's great to kind of just go into a rampage mode because of the health that you're going to be recovering for that next 5, 10, 15 seconds. It's highly beneficial. Recovery is a little slow on Izuna, and the might is solid, usable time is great. In terms of using this in actual gameplay, you can see how it kind of comes out in this coiling snake pattern. It does a great job for hitting, say, 2 enemies that are pretty close to, you know, you and in front of you, that are not too far apart. If they're far apart, it's going to be much less effective when you use, say, the moment talisman or you use the actual living weapon. But it's just overall, I found it to be a fantastic. And if I had to choose kind of one backup, you know, or something like that, I actually like the Kato. And this is mostly because of the key benefits you get out of this. This would kind of be like my backup, like honorable mention. So the close combat attack benefit is solid. It's decent. It's not great, but it's decent. The key is you get a huge buff on that. You get a huge buff on your key recovery speed. So if you want to constantly put pressure on somebody, this is fantastic. It also decreases your close combat key usage when your health is low, and skill damage at 15%. So all solid recovery. A-. Might is on the lower end, and usable time is, you know, in the mid-range. But overall, a very it's really all about key in this one here. And so if you want to, you know, have a high key type build where you really put a lot of pressure and you constantly regenerate key fast and everything's based around key, then this would be my honorable mention recommendation. So that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I look forward to your comments and questions and feedback on this. Make sure to subscribe, give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and keep an eye out for more Nioh videos. We're going to be producing a lot more Nioh videos, especially with all the DLCs, PvP, and all the stuff that's kind of come out with this. There's going to be a lot more Nioh to come here. So that's it, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.